The headline in Mexico's Esto newspaper stopped readers cold. She learned the taco technique in one sitting, February 1962. The woman they were writing about was Marilyn Monroe, and the revelation that shocked Mexico wasn't that Hollywood's biggest star had visited their country. It was that she'd walked into a 45-year-old bullfighters taqueria in Centro Historico and genuinely tried to master something as ordinary as folding a tortilla. The photograph accompanying the article showed Marilyn at El Taquito, smiling without the calculated precision of her studio portraits, her fingers carefully working the tortilla the way the staff had demonstrated. It was an image of vulnerability, of someone trying to be normal in a life that had long ago abandoned normal. For 62 years, that photograph hung on El Taquito's wall, alongside pictures of Maria Felix, Diego Rivera, and decades of celebrities who'd passed through its doors since 1917. Then in 2024, the restaurant's owners made an announcement that felt impossible. El Taquito was closing its historic Carmen Street location after 107 years, forced out by rising informal street commerce and dwindling customer access. They would reopen in San Jose Insurgentes, but the building that held Marilyn's memory would be locked forever. And the story everyone thought they knew about, that 1962 visit, suddenly revealed a hidden truth. Marilyn Monroe came to Mexico City 6 months before her death, desperately seeking escape from the cameras and pressures that were killing her. Yet even in a taqueria founded for bullfighters, even in a city thousands of miles from Los Angeles, the flashbulbs found her. The difference was what she was doing when they did. Not performing, not posing, just learning to fold a taco, like any person trying to belong somewhere they'd never been. Before we continue with what happened that February night in Mexico City, if you're fascinated by the untold stories of Marilyn Monroe's final year, please subscribe to this channel. We're uncovering the moments that reveal who she really was when the cameras weren't watching. February 1962 arrived in Los Angeles with the weight of a prison sentence. Marilyn Monroe stood in her Brentwood home, staring at scripts she couldn't focus on, phone messages from Fox executives she couldn't return, and prescription bottles she couldn't stop opening. Something's Got to Give, the film she was contractually obligated to complete, had become a nightmare of demands and public humiliation. The director didn't trust her. The producers were calculating her insurance value versus her box office draw. And the pills that were supposed to help her function were creating a fog she couldn't navigate through anymore. She needed to disappear. Mexico City became that possibility. The Mexican film director Emilio Fernandez, known as El Indio, had extended an invitation months earlier. He represented something Marilyn had been searching for since her marriage to Arthur Miller ended: intellectual respect from the artistic community. Fernandez wasn't offering her a blonde bombshell role. He was offering conversation about cinema theory, about art that mattered beyond box office receipts. It was validation that made her feel like more than a studio asset. The trip was arranged quietly. No studio publicity team, no orchestrated photo opportunities. Just Marilyn, a small travel group, and the hope that Mexico City might let her breathe for the first time in months. What she didn't fully understand was that in Mexico, Marilyn Monroe wasn't just a Hollywood star. She was a cultural phenomenon that had transcended borders. Mexican audiences had watched her films with the same obsession as American crowds, but they'd layered their own interpretations onto her image. To them, she represented both the allure of American glamour and a tragic vulnerability that resonated with Mexican artistic sensibilities. The moment her plane touched down, word leaked through informal networks of airport workers and taxi drivers who recognized the world's most famous face. By the time she reached her hotel, photographers were already positioning themselves outside. Yet there was a crucial difference between the paparazzi culture of Los Angeles and what she encountered in Mexico City. The Mexican press approached celebrity with a mixture of reverence and warmth that felt less predatory. They wanted photographs, but they also wanted to welcome her, to show her their city with pride. Mexico City in 1962 was a metropolis caught between tradition and transformation. The historic Centro Historico carried the architectural weight of Spanish colonial rule, with Baroque churches and grand plazas that had witnessed centuries of revolution. But modern Mexico City was also exploding with energy, new construction, artistic movements inspired by Rivera and Kahlo's legacy, a thriving film industry, and nightlife that blended mariachi tradition with contemporary sophistication. For Marilyn, who'd grown up in Los Angeles foster homes and built her identity in Hollywood studios, Mexico City offered something intoxicating, a place where her fame was acknowledged but not worshipped in the suffocating way she'd experienced in America. Emilio Fernandez became her guide through this world. El Indio was a towering figure in Mexican cinema who'd directed films that combined indigenous themes with sophisticated cinematography. His home in Coyoacán became one of Marilyn's first stops, and what happened there revealed how desperately she wanted to be taken seriously as an artist, not just consumed as an image. But what nobody expected was how quickly Marilyn would embrace the most ordinary aspects of Mexican life. The tequila in Coyoacán wasn't served in crystal glasses at an exclusive party. It was poured in a neighborhood gathering where locals mixed with artists, where conversation flowed in Spanish and English and the universal language of laughter. Marilyn didn't just sip politely. She asked questions about the agave plant, about the production process, about why this particular region's tequila tasted different. It was the curiosity of someone who wanted to understand, not just consume. And that curiosity led her to Carmen Street in Centro Histórico, to a restaurant called El Taquito that had been serving bullfighters, artists, and neighborhood regulars since 1917. El Taquito wasn't designed for tourists. Founded in 1917 as a restaurante taurino, it existed to serve the bullfighting community that dominated Mexican sports culture. The walls were decorated with taurine memorabilia, photographs of matadors, and the accumulated history of nearly 5 decades of service. By 1962, it had evolved into something more complex, a gathering place where Mexico City's elite mixed with working-class regulars, where food quality mattered more than customer status, and where staff treated everyone with the same mixture of efficiency and warmth. When Marilyn Monroe walked through El Taquito's doors that February evening, she wasn't arriving as a planned publicity stunt. The visit emerged organically from conversations about where to find authentic Mexican food. Someone mentioned El Taquito, someone else confirmed its reputation, and Marilyn, who'd spent years eating studio commissary food and carefully managed restaurant appearances, made a decision that revealed her state of mind. She wanted to go somewhere real. The restaurant staff didn't have advance warning. There was no time to prepare a special table or create a private dining experience. When Marilyn entered with her small group, the restaurant was operating exactly as it always did. Busy, loud, filled with the clatter of dishes and rapid-fire Spanish conversations. The owner and staff recognized Marilyn immediately. But instead of stopping service or treating her arrival as a disruption requiring special protocols, they did something that would define the entire evening. They treated her like a customer who deserved their best service, not a celebrity requiring special handling. A table was offered. Not isolated in a corner, not positioned for optimal photograph angles, but simply the next available table in the restaurant's natural flow. Marilyn sat down. And in that moment, something shifted in her body language that would be captured in the photographs taken that night. Her shoulders relaxed. The performance tension that Hollywood photographers had documented for years seemed to dissolve. She looked at the menu with genuine curiosity. This was hunger. This was interest. This was a woman who wanted to taste something real. The menu at El Taquito offered traditional Mexican dishes that would have been completely unfamiliar to most American tourists in 1962. This was decades before Mexican cuisine became widely understood in the United States beyond bastardized Tex-Mex versions. The vocabulary itself would have been foreign: carnitas, barbacoa, nopales, gusano de maguey. That last item became the focus of the evening that would scandalize and delight Mexican newspaper readers the next morning: maguey worm tacos. For Americans raised in the sanitized food culture of 1950s United States, eating insects was shocking. But gusano de maguey wasn't dare food. It was a delicacy in Mexican cuisine, traditionally associated with mezcal production and considered both a cultural tradition and a culinary sophistication. The worms are harvested from agave plants, carefully prepared, and served in ways that highlight their unique flavor. When Marilyn's group ordered, someone suggested she try the gusano de maguey. It wasn't meant as a test. It was a genuine recommendation from people who understood the restaurant's specialties. And Marilyn, who could have politely declined, who could have ordered something safer, made a choice that revealed something essential about her psychology in those final months. She said yes. But here's what made the Esto newspaper headline more than just sensationalism. Marilyn didn't just taste the taco and move on. She asked the staff to teach her the proper technique for folding and eating it. This wasn't about performing cultural tourism, this was about genuinely wanting to understand the skill involved. The staff at El Taquito responded with patience and pride. They showed her how to hold the tortilla, how to fold it to contain the filling, how to eat it without everything spilling out, and Marilyn practiced. The photographs captured this moment with documentary accuracy, her fingers carefully working the tortilla, her expression concentrated and sincere, no trace of the manufactured sexuality that defined her public image. She was learning. She was genuinely engaged. And the vulnerability of that engagement, the willingness to be taught something as ordinary as taco folding by restaurant staff in Mexico City, revealed the person beneath the persona more clearly than any studio portrait ever could. The newspaper Esto understood the significance immediately. Their headline the next day wasn't mocking, it was celebratory. She learned the taco technique in one sitting. The subtext was clear. Marilyn Monroe, untouchable Hollywood goddess, had humbled herself to learn from ordinary Mexican workers. And in a culture that valued dignity and skill, that made her more than just a visiting celebrity, it made her, for one evening, part of the community. The image captured that night at El Taquito became one of the most reproduced photographs of Marilyn Monroe's final year, but not for the reasons most Hollywood publicity shots achieved fame. There was no careful lighting, no makeup artist standing by, no studio photographer directing her angles. What the camera captured was spontaneous, unguarded, and for that reason, more valuable than any manufactured glamour shot. Marilyn's smile in the photograph was genuine. Anyone who'd studied her publicity images could see the difference. Her Hollywood smile was a performance, calculated, seductive, designed to trigger specific fantasies. But the smile at El Taquito came from a different place. It was relief. It was the pleasure of being treated normally. It was the joy of successfully folding a taco after several attempts, cheered on by restaurant staff who cared about the skill, not the celebrity. The photograph showed her hands working the tortilla, still learning the technique. Her expression combined concentration and delight, and something else, belonging. For someone who'd spent her entire adult life as an outsider, who'd been passed between foster homes as a child and studio executives as an adult, that moment of belonging was precious. El Taquito gave her that gift, probably without fully understanding its significance. The restaurant's owners made a decision that would define their establishment's identity for the next 6 decades. They hung the photograph on the wall, not hidden in a back office, but displayed publicly, alongside images of other celebrities and regular customers who'd become part of El Taquito's extended family over decades of service. That photograph became a pilgrimage site. People came to El Taquito specifically to see where Marilyn Monroe had sat, to look at the image of her learning to fold a taco, to connect with a moment that felt more authentic than most of what Hollywood had produced about her. 6 months later, Marilyn Monroe would be found dead in her Brentwood home, killed by the prescription drugs she'd been using to survive the pressures that made that Mexico City escape necessary. The photograph at El Taquito became something different then, not just a celebrity sighting, but one of the last documented moments when she looked genuinely happy. El Taquito's decision to display Marilyn's photograph alongside other notable guests revealed something important about the restaurant's place in Mexico City's cultural landscape. This wasn't a celebrity hunting establishment. It was a gathering place that had organically become significant because of who it was, not because of who it courted. The walls told a story spanning Mexican history and culture. Photographs of Maria Felix, the Mexican actress who'd achieved international fame while maintaining fierce independence from Hollywood. Images of Diego Rivera, whose murals had defined Mexican artistic identity for decades. Politicians, bullfighters, artists, intellectuals, all captured at various moments across El Taquito's history, all treated with the same fundamental respect. That egalitarian approach meant El Taquito became something rare, a place where social hierarchies dissolved at the table. A government minister might share space with a construction worker. A famous actress might sit next to a family celebrating a birthday. And everyone received the same menu, the same service, the same expectation that they would appreciate the skill involved in preparing traditional Mexican cuisine correctly. For 62 years, that photograph remained on the wall at the Carmen Street location. Generations of Mexico City residents brought their children to see it. Tourists made El Taquito a required stop specifically because of the Marilyn connection. And the restaurant thrived, not despite its traditional approach, but because of it. In a rapidly changing Mexico City, El Taquito represented continuity. It connected customers to history, to decades of service, to the understanding that some things shouldn't change. But by 2024, the pressures that had been building for years finally reached a breaking point. Centro Histórico, despite its UNESCO World Heritage status, had been gradually overwhelmed by informal street commerce. Vendors selling everything from phone accessories to traditional crafts packed the sidewalks, making it increasingly difficult for customers to access established businesses. Foot traffic declined, and El Taquito's owners faced an impossible choice: close permanently or relocate. August 2024, the announcement came through Mexican press outlets with the weight of cultural loss. El Taquito, the 107-year-old taqueria where Marilyn Monroe had learned to fold tacos, was closing its Carmen Street location. The owners explained carefully. This wasn't failure. It was the reality of trying to maintain a traditional business where informal commerce had made sustainable operation impossible. The reaction from Mexico City residents revealed how deeply the restaurant had embedded itself in collective memory. Social media filled with photographs, family celebrations, tourist visits inspired by the Marilyn photograph, tributes from regular customers who'd been eating there for decades. The closure felt like losing a piece of the city's soul. The owners announced a new location in San Jose Insurgentes. El Taquito would continue serving traditional Mexican cuisine. The photographs, including the image of Marilyn, would move to the new space. The recipes, the quality standards, the commitment to dignified service, all would transfer. What couldn't transfer was the building itself, the specific space where Marilyn had sat in February 1962, where 107 years of Mexican cultural life had accumulated in the walls. The new El Taquito opened on September 18, 2024. The owners replicated what they could: the photographs, the menu, the service philosophy, but something intangible was lost, something that couldn't be transported: the weight of history, the sense that you were eating where Marilyn Monroe had actually sat, where 107 years of continuous service had created an atmosphere new construction couldn't replicate. The story of El Taquito and Marilyn Monroe's 1962 visit reveals something essential about how memory works and why we preserve certain moments. We're not just losing a restaurant, we're losing physical evidence that certain moments happened, that certain people existed outside their manufactured public personas, that there were spaces where ordinary and extraordinary lives intersected without hierarchy. Marilyn Monroe's visit to El Taquito mattered because it captured her in a state Hollywood never quite managed to document: genuinely relaxed, genuinely curious, genuinely engaged with something beyond her own image. When the Carmen Street location closed, that physical evidence became more fragile. The table where she sat, the specific room where she laughed while learning to fold tortillas, all of that was lost. For the generation that remembers Marilyn Monroe's death in August 1962, El Taquito represented something powerful. Proof that even in her final months, when the prescription drug addiction and studio pressures were destroying her, there were still moments of genuine joy. What happens to memory when the places that held it disappear? The answer might be simpler than we think. We're preserving evidence of our own humanity, evidence that connection is possible, evidence that dignity can be maintained even in the presence of overwhelming fame. Marilyn Monroe's visit to El Taquito in February 1962 gave us that evidence, and for 62 years, the restaurant kept that evidence safe. Now El Taquito exists in a new location, carrying its photographs and recipes into a different neighborhood. The story continues, but in a different form. Nothing stays the same. Places change, buildings are lost, but the decision to treat people with dignity, to honor skill and tradition, to create spaces where ordinary and extraordinary can intersect, that decision can move forward. The next time you visit Mexico City, you can find El Taquito at its new location. The photograph of Marilyn learning to fold a taco still hangs on the wall. What you won't find is the exact table where she sat. But maybe that's not what matters most. Maybe what matters is the ongoing decision to preserve quality, dignity, and the possibility that anyone who walks through the door deserves the same fundamental respect. That's the legacy El Taquito maintained for 107 years. That's what moved in 2024. And that's what makes a taquito matter. Not the famous people who visited once, but the commitment to excellence that made those visits possible. Marilyn Monroe came to El Taquito looking for authenticity. She found it, and for one February evening, 6 months before her death, she got to be something she rarely experienced. Just a person learning something new, welcomed without worship, treated with dignity, belonging.